Now, Mairi, you've been involved in 40 Days for Life, the prayer vigils outside the abortion clinic in Edinburgh for a few years now. Been involved in the family party, been married to me. So basically, people know where you stand on a lot of issues. Does that worry you? Or how does that work out in your life?
I would say there's been quite a lot of consequences from that. I think the first thing, the first impact was really being exposed. I think a lot of people with socially conservative views, maybe they might kind of keep them quiet sometimes and maybe express them other times. But because of Richard and the Scottish Family Party, it's all out there, and it's just this sense of suddenly you're kind of outed in a way as socially conservative, and it's sort of, there's nowhere to hide, really. I think that was the first consequence of it, and I think that brings with it quite a lot of fear. So it's like the second consequence, I would say, quite a lot of fear. I think one of the things that's impacted me is when the doorbell goes, and I don't know who it is at the door, I can have a little bit of fear about opening the door. It could be somebody that hates us and wants to throw something or do something. So things like that, it kind of has an impact on your life. The communities that I'm part of, like our street is a sort of cul-de-sac with 26 houses, and Richard has been known before the Scottish Family Party. We know that a neighbour was offended at him writing letters to the Scotsman, and it had our address on it. It was mandatory. The Scotsman had this condition that to have a letter published, you had to have a little bit of your address. So people were really offended that Richard was presenting these views in the Scotsman, but with that address on it. And fast forward all these years, maybe sort of 8-10 years later, it'll probably seem like a small thing, but there's a WhatsApp group in our street, and I'm not allowed on it. It's just like community. You're kind of pushed out. You're sort of beyond the pale. You know, we don't want that kind here, sort of thing. So that, I would say, that's been some of the consequences. Having a very messy garage, which prepared to buy a garage full of placards and leaflets. And financial, I think before the party started, Richard was kind of, well, we were thinking maybe we could extend our house, you know, do some improvements to the house. And it's things like that, you know, that's not really an option now. So there's a financial cost as well.
Okay, how about, we're both Christians, how about a church and the church community, meeting with other Christians?
Yeah, I think in church is quite a mixture. It's probably, I don't know, somewhere maybe 80-90% are just kind of really don't know what to make of us. You know, it's just like not comfortable with this, don't know how to talk about this. And quite often in conversations, you know, just normal conversation, oh, what does your husband do, politics. Quite often that leads to silence, but if it gets further and it sort of gets into what the family party's about, there's a sort of what I call the veil of silence comes down, or people suddenly have to be somewhere else. There's an urgent something or other somewhere else. And I think it's not, I don't think it's people's fault really, but I think it's just they're not trained up, discipled into thinking about these things, so they just don't know how to handle it when it does come up.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'll just throw in a story as well on the similar lines in terms of consequences. When I was working in the school, there were three members of staff. I didn't know them hugely well, but we'd work together and have a chat over the meal table occasionally. And then after I'd left the school, my case with the General Teaching Council of Scotland was going on when they were thinking about striking me off for saying that children need a mum and a dad ideally. And these three of my colleagues all made public statements saying I should be struck off. I was quite shocked. I mean, these were people, I just thought, not my best mates, but just colleagues. But that's what was under the surface. For all those years, they really were so bitter and resentful or whatever of my views that that's the way they were willing to respond when it came to the crunch. Anyway, moving on. Now I was going to raise an issue that comes up it's come up on several occasions with the family party, and that's the case where husband is dead keen to be involved, but wife, in some cases, says basically no, or is very restrictive about that. What would you say to them?
I would say, in a nutshell, don't try to tame them and don't try to contain them. And I think just elaborating on that, I think men, generally speaking, it's lovely to see so many men here, are wired up to be more adventurous, to take on great exploits. I think that's seen in just the normal things like getting involved in extreme sports, car racing, watching war movies, action movies. I think men are just wired up differently. And I think women can try to sort of stop men from being men, really. And I was thinking about an analogy of circus animals. In 2018, Scotland passed a law about it's called the Wild Animals and Travelling Circuses Scotland Act. And it's basically illegal to have wild animals in a circus act. And it's quite a good analogy because these animals are potentially taken out of their natural habitat and they're kept in a cage. They're kind of forced into trained into doing things that are completely unnatural to them. And it's just like that image of a lion, that's been sort of trained into submission, kept in a cage, and its sort of fur's all mangy, and its eyes are dull, and it never roars, because it's just so kind of trained to just submit. And I think just with that image, just hold that image, but there's a song I was thinking about, and I don't know if anybody remembers it, it's Bonnie Tyler, I Need a Hero. And the first line of that song is, "Where have all the good men gone?" And I think they're like the lion, that's been trained into submission. It's sort of like it's held in a cage of domesticity and trained into this kind of submissive role rather than being in its natural habitat. And I think a lot of men, I'm not addressing men here, but I think a lot of men have been just trained into that. And I think really it's stopping men from being men. I think we need to let men be men, just be who they're created to be, just released really from, that sort of cage of domesticity.
That's a great phrase. I like that one. I mean, we come across situations as well where it's the other way around, where it's the wife's dead keen to get involved, but husbands, not. You have anything to say in that situation?
Yeah, I would say, again, sticking with that analogy of this sort of lion that's been used in a circus, it's really in that situation, it's for entertainment, it's for the pleasure of the audience. It's using and abusing an animal really for pleasure. And it's like that selfish motivation, really. And I think if in that sort of scenario, I think that man should maybe question why. Why are you stopping this woman from, doing what she maybe really feels passionate about? Is it selfish? Is it a sort of selfish motive for preventing her from doing that? And to really just question why you would stop that woman from doing that.
Yeah, thank you. We have had cases in the family party where people have been involved, and it's been their children that have objected. Their children giving ultimatums to their parents: if you don't leave the family party, I'm going to do this. We've heard of cases where children have said to their parents, if you don't leave the family party, you're not allowed to see your grandchildren. How about that? How about that? That's an extreme case, but you hear other stories like that. What would you have to say about that?
I think you've got quite a good answer to that. I think that's one you've thought through quite a lot. I think you'd be better to answer that.
Yeah, well, the piece of advice, homespun advice, I give to people in these situations is I think sometimes people need to realize that there's nothing to play for. If you give people the message, if you get even more upset, then I'll rein in my involvement a bit more. And if you get even more upset than that, maybe I'll stop my involvement completely. If people think that's what's the game, what are they motivated to do? What's it in their interest to do? It's to get more and more and more upset. Whereas I think sometimes it's a good idea to say, well, I've listened to your concerns, but I've decided that this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to continue doing that, and I'm going to continue doing that no matter what. Then the other person thinks, well, there's nothing to play for anymore. That there's no point, trying to throw my toes even further from the ground, trying to claim to be even more upset. And I think sometimes that's a way to stop the situation. Because we see people get into the situation where they're under pressure and they retreat a bit. Then I think the other family members think, know what next? Let's put them under even more pressure, and even more and even more. So I think we've got to get out of that process. The advice I've sometimes given to people is just decide where you're going to draw the line, and then the line's drawn, and everyone knows where they stand, and hopefully you can move on from that. And my last question for Mairi was, we've talked about a lot of challenges here along the way, being involved in this sort of work. So why'd you do it?
I think it's just weighing up, just weighing up. I think recently doing the 40 Days for Life, most people will have probably seen the video with the milk incident. Poor Phil came off the worst in that. But that night after that, it's quite a shock, even though it was only milk, still quite a shock, somebody coming up behind you with a balaclava on, it's not pleasant. And I was awake for about 2 or 3 hours in the night, just thinking about it, thinking about my safety of volunteers, could have been a lot worse, and really weighing it up, it's like, what's this all about? It's about 17,000 babies a year being killed in the womb. What's a bit of milk compared to that? It's just like, it's weighing it up. And I think these convictions, I think they either sort of die on the vine or they grow and they get deeper. And I think that's what happened then, and it continues to happen with me, just that conviction that this is right to be fighting these things. Teenagers are being mutilated, government-funded mutilation of teenagers, and children being corrupted in schools, and this is important. It's important, and going back to, where have all the good men gone? That's what good men do, and women support them. They get involved, and it's too important to not do anything, really.
Okay. I was just about to invite a round of applause for Mairi, but it was spontaneous. Now, we're actually running ahead of schedule, which is unheard of in the history of conferences, I believe. And we have 10 minutes or so before the break time. So what we decided to do, if we had a bit of time, was just to invite some questions from the audience for Mairi and myself. Neil, have we got a microphone we can do that?
It's a point about your comments about kids and family and grandchildren. I've told you before that my wife won't get involved because of the impact on the family. It's not the family pressurising the kids. The fact that she doesn't want her daughter and her granddaughter and her grandson drawn into what we're doing. And it is messy. And sometimes you've got to draw a line and say, that's as far as it's going.
I just wondered what has been the impact on your children. Are they supportive? Do they find it difficult?
Our children are mixed. I mean, one of them would be very much on our wavelength. One of them are very much not. One of them have had incidents at school. We've heard other family party representatives, their children have had, I don't know if bullying might be, bullying, whatever, negative reaction from other children at school. And the problem with that is normally a bullying incident at school, you'd assume like the school position is going to be. Is the school going to be sympathetic to the bullies, or is the school going to be sympathetic to the child getting a hard time? You can't be at all sure. And in terms of family facing the negative effects, I think with that, I suppose the key thing there is the shared vision. Because if someone's restricted from fulfilling their calling, if you like, fulfilling their vocation, that's a very serious impact on that person. So I think as a family, it can be difficult. There can be the negative experiences. You might have said about, when the doorbell goes, you go to the door. I do that as well. Every time there's a knock on the door, I go to that door ready to confront someone who's there with ill intent. And that's quite a price to pay, isn't it? It's quite a price to pay. But on the other hand, what's the price to pay the other way? The price to pay the other way is to be not living the life you're supposed to be living. To know that there's things you ought to be doing, but you're not doing them. And what does that do to someone in the long term if you go through your life but basically taking the easy turns but not the right turns? What sort of person does that create? And what sort of person do you want in your family? How is that going to affect the whole family dynamic? So yeah, I'm quite sympathetic to family members who might face these difficulties. But on the other hand, I would say there's a price to pay either way as well.
Okay, great. One more question, and then we go to break.
Gentlemen, have we got one? Okay.
As a woman, why do you think it is important for men to protect the unborn children?
Why not?
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, this whole idea that you can only have an opinion on something if you've got certain body parts. I mean, I would agree with that to one extent. You can only have an opinion on things if you've got a brain. Okay, if you've got a brain, you can think through the issues. You can think through the issues, listen to your conscience, form an opinion, and campaign for what you think's right. So that's my take there. Now, Neil is telling us time is up, but thank you very much for listening, and thank you to Mairi, and I'll speak to you later.